I don't know why this one's so weird for me. My entire life is my childhood, so I could literally say absolutely anything, and it would be to do with child and youth affairs.
I remember when my mum had to sit me down and explain to me that Santa wasn't real. I remember she thought I was so upset because he wasn't real. But weirdly enough, my brain was like, I just can't believe you lied to me for all these years. And that was kind of not where my childhood ended, but the big difference between childhood and becoming a teenager or an adult is when you learn to not believe everything and when you stop trusting in things.
When I was young, I used to share a room with my brother, and we used to have bunk beds. And this was back when I was like 5, 6, 7, and I was still wearing kiddie socks. So when I went to bed, my dad would always come in and he'd say, "Are any of you wearing socks?" So I'd always lie, because I'd always have really cold feet, and I'd always wear socks. So, and he always knew that I was lying. So when he was tucking me in, he'd go into the end of the bed and he'd stick his hand under the covers and he'd say, "There's a sock on this foot," and I'd be like, "Ah!" And I was like, "You got me." And I don't know why, but that was just one of the childhood memories that really stuck with me.
I think children around the world with disabilities such as autism and Down syndrome are finding it very difficult to cope with what's going on in the world at the moment. Because they might not understand the effects of coronavirus very well, and they might be finding it hard to keep a safe distance from family members and friends.
My brother has autism. I honestly don't think he's disabled, but the government do. And yeah, sometimes I think to myself, was he put on this planet for a reason? And was it for me? Was it so that I could become more understanding, more empathetic? Because it has changed my life, and I'm just thinking about the person that I could have, or that I would have been if it weren't for my brother. Would I have been a less nice person? I don't know, but I'm grateful for the way that my brother is, and yeah, I don't see him as a child with autism. I just see him as my brother.
What I want to work as when I'm older is with children or teenagers with autism. I just got interested in that particular area because I know a few people with severe autism where they lack social and emotional skills. I have good patience and emotional skills, so I can just chat away to them and calm them down when they're angry or upset.
My mom, she worked with Enable Ireland, yeah. I'd like to work with people with disabilities when I'm older. I'd have a lot of that would be one of the things I'd definitely like to do when I'm older, because you're caring after the truly vulnerable, and what else in life is more important,
I was a little scared to go to different places I've never been before. Say if it was a group of people that I don't know, I was afraid they wouldn't like me because of my disability. But ever since I joined Docus, Gemstars and LYT in the Panto, everyone has been so kind to me, and I really enjoyed every minute of it. It's just that I'm finding it a little difficult to cope with life because of my disability, but I'm managing it and I'm getting it through it eventually. It's just this department means a lot to me.
I feel like it's more accepting to be who you are and to have a vulnerable side, and there's a lot more support about letting you be who you want to be.
In hindsight, going to see The Greatest Showman as a first date doesn't bode well when the person you're staring at, no, the person you're dating is staring at Zendaya and you're over there lusting over Hugh Jackman.
Dating is seen as such an inherent part of the teen experience. Your first love, your first heartbreak. But I feel that's majorly lacking in LGBTQ plus kids.
I feel like the standard for being a parent is really low. You're expected to be grateful that your parents brought you into existence and allowed you to exist. But I feel ultimately it's a selfish decision because they don't know you. They have no idea who you are because you don't exist yet. They're doing it because they want a child in the world, and they want to have the experience of raising a child. It's strange. Being a parent doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you're more responsible. It just means that you should be more responsible. And I feel like a lot of people just see it as a natural conclusion, as the next step in their relationship. And that can really mess up a kid.
So something that really annoys me is when a cis person is really, really, really apologetic when they misgender you. Like, they're like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'm such a terrible person, oh my god. Which puts you in a position where you to be like, no, it's okay, don't worry about it. Even though for some trans people being misgendered freaking sucks. Like, it's shitty. And, you know, like, we have to put aside our feelings to comfort the fragile cis people, because if we're mean to them, they feel like we don't get to have our gender respected.
The definition of feminist, somebody who believes in equal rights for men and women. And they do believe that, but they wouldn't call themselves a feminist. Because of the, for some reason, people associate it with man-hating. And it doesn't make any sense how it's gotten this, reputation for, hating men, you know? I have friends who are girls, and they would say they're not feminist. And it's really... It disappoints me, because I think everyone should be one, you know?
Gender's a fucking social construct anyway.
It's so annoying when the people who do say all lives matter are acting as if they're like, no, I believe in equality. But the fact that you're saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter suggests that you don't think that there's a problem when it comes to racism and how black people and people of colour are being treated.
There's a massive difference between free speech and hate speech.
For me, culture is something that I chose. I choose it because your interests are your culture. Your interests are formed on what you like and what you partake in. And for me, it was something that I struggled with for a long time. I always thought that people would think I'm too weird and wouldn't accept what I was into, what I liked. And it was kind of rough. When I got older, I realized, why am I stressing about what other people thought when they're all doing what they like and what they want to do? I should be able to do that as well.
I love how Ireland is so multicultural. I love being able to see all those different cultures in Limerick alone. I love being able to hear all those different stories from all different walks of life. Seeing Ireland grow and progress as a nation toward a nation with more diversity.
From a cultural point of view, it was an immersion program. So you were immersing yourself in the culture of Kolkata. So as well as visiting the protection homes and the rehabilitation centres that the Hope Foundation have set up there, we took part in dancing with the children. We got henna tattoos, we had a sari night, we ate Indian food. It was a chance for young people from Ireland to immerse themselves in the culture of another country. And just a little, something that will always stick with me when I think of this trip, not only is what the money has done for these children and what the homes are doing and what Hope themselves are doing for these kids is amazing, but a story that will always stick with me is when you went to visit the homes, you'd play with the children and they taught us this handshake. they taught us how to do a handshake, and it was a way to kind of break the ice, like an almost secret. It's like a little key. We were getting on a flight in Dubai, and we did the little handshake just before. I was ahead, and I turned, and when the flight attendant was taking my boarding card to show me to my seat, he turned and he said, "Have a nice flight," and he did the handshake. And this was, obviously, it's a tiny thing. It's like shaking someone's hand. But it was something we had learned from children who had been saved from living on the street in Kolkata. So it was a part of their culture.
For some reason, I've always identified as more Irish than Bangladeshi. I mean, I love Bangladeshi food and I love speaking the language, and I just love interacting that way. In the last few years, I've really got to, immerse myself in the Bangladeshi community. I mean, because before that, we were kind of isolated, because my parents wanted us to assimilate into the Irish culture, to fit in. So my mother kept that Bangladeshi culture inside me by feeding me the food and feeding me the language from a young age. Sometimes I feel like I'm not a proper representation of my culture because I haven't interacted with it enough, which is a huge personal dilemma, and especially with religious culture, because I grew up in a not so religious environment, and that kind of separates me from my peers, my Bangladeshi peers, who would be strictly Muslim. So it's very conflicting, and I'm a little bit emotional right now.
When I was learning French in secondary school, I could see all the similarities between Irish and French. And because Europe in general has such an interconnected history and culture, and I guess we shouldn't take that for granted, because no culture exists in isolation. But even in that sense, a lot of people often say that there are some really big similarities between Gaelic languages, so like Scottish Gaelic, Welsh and Irish, and Semitic languages, which is fascinating to me because I have a very distant, small Jewish heritage, and the idea that there is such a big similarity between Gaelga and Hebrew is just fascinating. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that when we look into our own cultures, we get a better understanding of the world and how connected we are, without getting too silly and deep about it, but yeah.
Brisin sé macrí nach bhfuil an culture sin ag fiosú agus ag scapa agus ag spreagadh daoine Gaeilge agus an cultúr a úsáid níos mó. Agus de bharr gur chuaigh mé go dtí an Gaeltacht, bhí mé in ann scéalta a chlostáil ó daoine eile, agus ní bheidh an sean sin agam man a raibh an culture agus an Gaeilge agam.
I actually wanted to talk about the topic of accents because I find that very interesting. I feel like having an accent is a really big part of a culture of a country, and I've always been really confused about my accent because I don't know if it's obvious, but I have a really strange accent. To me, myself, I sound Irish, but to other people, they've said I sound like a million different things. Some people say I sound Nigerian or Jamaican, and some people say I sound British. Some people say I sound Irish, and some people have said that I sound American, which is really strange. I don't know. But I've also had people tell me that they only recently found out that I wasn't African American, and they might have known me for like a decade. It's so strange. But it also kind of makes me a bit insecure because I feel like already being a person of colour from Ireland, people already look at me and they say, oh, you're not properly Irish. And I feel like not having the Irish accent is like the cherry on top for them to be able to look at me and say, oh, you're not properly Irish because you don't even speak like an Irish person.
I think, like, for me, I did speech and drama when I was younger, and then I did more theatre as I got older, and I've been to a good few plays, and I just think it's such a wonderful form of catharsis for me and so many others, and it's an important part of my life. I think it's such a shame because the thing is now that a lot of actors are being pushed out of Dublin because they can't afford to live there anymore, and I think we don't give any accommodations to them, and once you start pushing artists out of a city, the city kind of loses its life and its culture, and it dies a little bit.
Like, my family were always involved with Irish dancing. My mother was an Irish dancer. Most of my uncles were Irish dancers. My grandmother, like, going all the way back. Generations of my family were Irish dancers. Like, my family really, my mother loves bragging about how we're so artistic and talented. Like, she boasts about it. Like, my eldest sister is a fashion designer and a makeup artist. And then my second eldest sister, she is a musician and she sings. I'm the theatre head of the family. Like, I'm the thespian, if you want to put it like that. And, like, I sing, I dance, I act. Can't draw for shit, but, you know, 'tis what it is. And then my youngest sister, she sings, she dances, she sometimes acts. Sometimes acts like a bitch, but we won't talk about that.
I just really, 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 really like traveling. I love going to different countries and seeing different cultures.
I was literally half the weight, size of everyone basically, and yeah, when I took to the rugby pitch, they would, or my mum after the game would always tell me about how all the other parents would be whispering and chatting about how little I was, and I took great pride in that. Some of my sporting heroes are Shane Williams, Faf de Klerk, Peter Stringer, just to name a few, and they were small men, and they were Davids that slayed Goliaths. They were giant slayers. They took down the big men, and although they didn't have big size, they had big hearts, and that's what matters.
When I think of culture, I probably think of theatre because it's such a massive part in my life.
Without acting, music and books, I'd be nothing. Nothing has affected me more than a good book has. I'd like to thank the author who got me into reading, but she's a raging transphobic bitch. So I have to thank somebody. I don't know, Agatha Christie.
A lot of the time I felt like classical music was very hard because I was doing exam after exam. And then I tried trad, and it's so fun because it's all about being relaxed and having a good time, and that's just been great. And it's also helped me identify more with Irish culture, which is always good, because I haven't fully been able to identify with Irish culture.
When it comes to culture, I feel like I've always kind of been growing up with that. And that's mostly because of my dad. I feel like we've always been going to plays, theatre, seeing ballets or musical shows. And whenever we go abroad, or even here, we go to museums. And we would watch some unusual films from time to time. And it wasn't until later on that I found out that these were like critically acclaimed good movies. And I didn't realize that I had seen them as a younger child.
Just because you're growing up doesn't mean you have to leave fun behind. And I think that animation kind of falls into that same category where it's sort of disregarded because it's not as serious as live action, even though it can be, and it can do it better, but people don't see it that way because cartoons are for kids and stuff.
Ever since I was a kid, I was always interested in Japanese culture. I watch anime and I also read Japanese comic books.
I was never really interested in sport, so I did ballet for a good number of years. And then after that, I did set dancing in primary school. And later I did frontline. And I did TYT, which brought me to LYT, which I'm really loving, especially the community and just meeting people who sort of share the same interest in theatre.
The first time I did anything to do with theatre was when I was 11, I think. No, 10, I'd say. 9, I think 9. The principal of my primary school, she put together this play, and I was one of the fairies. It was like a Cinderella Rockefeller, and I was one of the fairy godmothers, and I loved it so much. It was like honestly the best part of school ever. And then when I went into secondary school, when I left secondary school in second year, I joined a theatre, County Limerick Youth Theatre. I joined them and I loved it and it was amazing. And I worked with Fiona Quinn, whom I love and adore. She is an amazing woman. I owe so much to her. And I've met my best friend. I met my best friend there too. And it also made me accept my sexuality, which is something that I struggled with from a very young age. I guess it was like a safe space. Like I say, a safe haven. But yeah, I loved theatre there.
Ever since I was a young girl, I always knew I wanted to have a career in the arts. I mean, I kind of forgot about that aspiration until LYT. LYT really brought back my love of acting and performance and kind of made me think, yeah, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
I used to look forward to going to LYT every Saturday because it got me out of the house and it was the one thing I've been excited to I haven't been excited for many things in my life, but knowing that I can see my pals and do something that I'm really interested in on a Saturday, that was just a great, it took stuff off my chest and it made me forget about certain things for a while.